Well, thank you very much, Teresa, for that very kind introduction. I'm blushing already, but I'm delighted to be here. I'm also, I've got to confess, slightly in awe because I am aware that as a mere lumpen politician, I am surrounded and facing an audience of very deep experts. So you will both individually and collectively know far more about the details of payments in all its wide variety than I possibly can. So I will try not to go beyond the edges of my ignorance into your areas of expertise. But I did want to talk to you briefly, if I can, this morning about the bill which is just going through Parliament, which Teresa just mentioned, because it does a whole load of other things. I heard one of your colleagues earlier on this morning describing this bill, the DPDI bill, as one bill to rule them all, because it does all sorts of things about privacy and other bits of information. But nestled in the middle of it, there are 6 or 7 what I think are absolutely key economic clauses which deal with smart data. And the reason why I'm so involved and so concerned about making sure that we get them right is that it has, I think, enormous potential implications, not just for payments, not just for open banking, which many of you will be very, very familiar with already, but actually for a potential positive, mostly positive, disruption for huge areas of the rest of the UK economy and potentially the global economy as well. And so everybody, I'm sure, at conferences like this and others to do with fintech, et cetera, turns up and sort of waves their arms around excitedly about the potential of data. But actually, how do you make it happen, not just in a commercial sense? Many of you will know huge amounts about how you are making that happen already. But how do you make it happen in a regulatory sense so that there are firm foundations for all of you to invest on and to develop new apps on and develop new middleware on and all those things? How do you make sure that you are not building on shifting sands and there is something firm and solid underpinning the regulatory regime? That's what this bill is supposed to do. It's partway through Parliament at the moment. And I guess that there are 2 or 3 things which I am really concerned to see in amongst it. The actual bits of legislation, the 6 or 7 clauses in the middle of the bill, most people, many of your colleagues, I hope, reckon are pretty good. There'll be a few touches and fettles and polishes that are required, but the actual substance of the legislation ain't bad by most people's accounting. The bit that's missing, I am arguing, is 2 or 3 things. One is pace. Many of you will know that we are in a wonderful position where open banking is something which seems to be a British success story. It's something where we are leading the world. We weren't the first people to get there. The Australians began it far before we did, but we leapfrogged them. We implemented open banking faster, more effectively. The level of penetration and uptake of open banking in this country is much higher than the rest of the world. The rest of the world is watching in envy and would like some of that, please. They're trying to overtake us. They are trying to leapfrog us. And there are many countries, many of them you will be aware of, anywhere from Brazil through to Australia as well, and India and others are trying to overtake us in different parts of the open banking and broader open finance world. But as it stands at the moment, we have a commercial lead in this area. If we stand still, they will overtake us. They are already coming up fast behind us in some cases on individual places, particularly in some areas of payments. Some of them are already perhaps technologically further ahead, but we currently have more people using this stuff in terms of open banking and open fintech. So how do we develop this? So we need speed. What else do we need? Well, the first thing we need is to say which other sectors can you take open banking to and roll it out across, because it's all very fine having something which is covered by the high street banks, but what about other sectors of the economy? What about energy? What about water? What about health? What about telecoms? What about online retailing? All these other sectors are potentially ripe for disruption in the same way, and many of you will have in your business plans, I'm sure, a glint in your eye, if not more, to say we would like to take our piece of fintech middleware in wherever you sit in the technology stack, and we would like to roll it out into these other adjacent sectors if we're given a chance. But which sectors in what order? So I've been pushing as hard as I can for some while for ministers to basically publish a timetable, an investable list of which sectors, in what order, by what dates. Because if they do that, then you can take something which currently works for open banking and say, well, we know that if we can now produce the module which will make it work for energy data or for online grocery retailing data or whatever it might be, we need to do energy by Q3 next year because that's when the government's going to have it already, and then by Q2 the following year it's going to be whatever it is, health or whatever. So I've been pushing governments to try and come up with this, and last week the minister, who's a very good man, a chap called Kevin Hollingrake, was in danger of committing news because I asked him a question in Parliament and he confessed. I'm not sure he was supposed to. His officials had their heads in their hands after he said it, but he said, look, I signed this thing off. It left my desk yesterday. So I'm really hopeful, and Westminster gossip is that this will happen, but it's only gossip, and Westminster gossip is as reliable as you want to claim it is. I'm really hopeful that we will get an investable list on this stuff within the next week or two. And if we do, then I hope that what that will do is give an awful lot of you a whole series of new commercial frontiers, new commercial opportunities to take what you currently have or what some of your suppliers or clients already have and roll that out. And at that point, we can start to stretch our lead from open banking into these other sectors, creating the apps which will then be used, we hope, by, and the middleware, which will then be used by many, many other countries as well. So that's step one. Step two is not just to tell you what's going to happen so everybody can start investing and lay their development plans and get their development teams lined up and ready and working on whatever it is that needs to be done so the Gantt charts can start to happen. Step two is all to say, it's all very well saying that we're going to take what's already happening in open banking and we're going to do it in, let's say, energy next. But what happens if the data standards in energy don't talk to the data standards that already exist in open banking? We are missing an enormous opportunity if they aren't interoperable, because at that point you basically have to reinvent the wheel every time you roll out open banking into a new sector. In fact, really, you're not rolling out open banking into a new sector, you're reinventing open banking each time, and that is a huge loss of speed, a huge loss of productivity, a huge loss of interoperability, and it means that the whole system will basically creak and groan and not work nearly as well as it would if it was interoperable. So the other thing, which I am devoutly hoping when this list comes out, that we're going to get, is I'm hoping that we're going to get somebody on high in government or in Whitehall to point at an institution, something like the Smart Data Council or somebody like that, and say, we need to have a standard setting body that makes sure that all these standards are interoperable so that you can leverage what you've already got across other sectors too, and therefore, and it's you. And we need a big hand. You remember those ads that used to come out for the National Lottery, with a large golden shining hand that would descend from on high and say, it's you. That's what we need for this standard setting body. It's not quite the case that I don't care who it is. I do care who it is. They need to be competent, they need to be capable, but there are a couple of organizations it could be. We need to choose one, give them the mandate, let them get cracking, because otherwise, if you are about to go back and brief your development teams about energy smart data or whatever it might be, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, well, what standards am I building this thing to satisfy? We know what our internal stuff is. We know we can make it interoperable internally, but what are the external standards that I have to do in order to make this thing work? And if you can't answer that, then it's going to go very slowly, and we're going to fall down on the pace that I was just talking about, and therefore, this announcement needs to have not just the investable list, but also the designation of who's going to be rolling out these standards, and then they need to get cracking really quickly. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that the rumors are right. I hope that the government and Whitehall officialdom have got the message, and that very shortly this will come out. And when it does, I hope that you will be as excited about this as I am, because of the potential for rolling out to new sectors that it will give some of either your businesses or your clients or your suppliers in order to make just life go better, life go faster, life go cheaper, and life be safer as well. Payments will be at the heart of all this. You don't need me to tell you all of that, you know that already, but it ought to mean that all of a sudden there is a bigger, brighter world out there, and at last it may actually be within our grasp. Fingers crossed. If it doesn't happen in the next week or 10 days, you'll be able to hear the cries of pain from my office without the aid of one of these headphones you're all wearing. But in the meantime, thank you all for listening to me. Thank you for inviting me. And with any luck, we will hear more from HMG very shortly. Thank you very much.